World War II. In America, a handful of young men refused to be drafted from an American concentration camp.
Well, I see we're just jumping right in cold. So this is Conscience and Constitution. I'm Frank Abe, and Erin Aoyama is also moderating.
Hello.
You have to take a stand
Can you,
someplace.
Restore our rights and
Erin,
free
can you
our
hear me okay?
families, and we'll be glad to fight.
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay, so this is the introduction to the film. This next shot coming up is, after this one, we shot in Frank Abe's judo studio, the Hollywood Dojo, and we had a whole sequence with Frank Abe showing us judo. That this is the only shot that made it in. This is Lori Matsukawa's voice doing the voiceover for the credits. I actually hired Lori to do this because I just wanted her voice in it. I wanted a female voice. I wanted a Japanese American voice to do the the PBS credits, and she was surprised how hard I rehearsed her on this. So this is it's good to hear her voice. So we're just jumping cold into the film. The typewritten idea was to replicate the bulletins that Frank Abe typed in camp. So that was an intentional choice for the graphic design. Here we're in Wyoming, and this actually was the first time that Frank Abe and Mitch Koshiyama returned to Wyoming after, 45 years. I want to mention our photographer, Phil Sturholm, shot all this footage in Heart Mountain. Phil was a great friend from Cairo TV, and I'll have more to say about him later. This is, again, Yosh Kuromiya and Irene Kuromiya. Irene was so great here because we just asked her to wander up the hill and kind of talk him through it, talk Yosh through it. And watch this next shot. I want you to watch very close what happens here. That is Lillian Benson's idea, our editor. Lillian just took our footage, and I'll say more about that in a minute, but
this was a concentration.
She took us, she made that jump for us from the present day to the past brilliantly with that one edit. Lillian Benson, I know we have 4 of our crew members watching this live stream right now. I guess just jumping right in. Shannon G, our producer, Lillian, our editor, Jim Wilson, our sound architect, and I hope Alan Koshiyama, our music composer.
Americans of Japanese ancestry.
I want to say something about them in a second. This archival footage is from the CBS film Pride and Shame, which I was allowed to use because I was told that it was, that Walter Cronkite got it from the National Archives. And we tried to go back to the National Archives to get it and was told that there was a fire there and all the films were destroyed. So we just took it from the CBS film. Bill Hosokawa, very gracious in speaking to us, even though he knew that we were doing a film critical of JACL. We talked to him at the 1994 JACL National Convention, which very little of that footage showed up in the film, actually. Curtis Choi shot this footage in the New Otani Hotel, I think, in Los Angeles, with Michi. Michi Weglin, look at her not costume, but her clothing. Michi, of course, a costume designer, and she's just so glamorous and so stylish in her comments. Lillian, I mean not Lillian, Michi. We spoke with her really just months before her death, and I know that she was in some pain while she was talking to us in advance of her recognition at the National Museum for her legacy. And she talked to us, and I think that she took some painkillers because she was not feeling very well. But she did a great job in the interview, and we're so glad to have her.
All the questions were in 28.
Frank Abe, what a gentleman.
Of the United States.
He kept the story of the Heart Mountain draft resistors alive single-handedly for 4 decades, and he, I think, was very grateful and pleased that we were able to give this attention to him and his story. When you go to Frank Abe's house in San Gabriel, I think, in the San Gabriel Valley,
at one time or another.
He had this study just crammed full of papers and files and books, that he was this public historian, keeping the story of the Fair Play Committee alive. And so I'm glad that we were able to finish this film before, well, he saw the film during his life.
Have you ever thought about it? It was gut-wrenching because if you were the oldest son, your loyalty belonged first to the family. You must take care of your mother.
Right.
I think that, yes, Erin.
You know, we can come back to this, but when did you first hear the story of the Draft Resistors?
In the early 80s, when playwright Frank Chin flew Frank Abe and James Omura up to Seattle, along, I think, with Roger Daniels, to meet with us at the Seattle Buddhist Church upstairs room. And he just wanted, and Frank paid for their airfares out of his own pocket. He wanted to introduce the story to us in Seattle. And that was the first time I met the guys. And from there, Frank and I did all these interviews in 1994 and 95. And that was the start of it. I mean, Frank was working on his book at the time. And there's a friend of mine, Christina Fa, who, we had just given James Omura the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Asian American Journalists Association conference in San Francisco in like '89. And James Omura was so profoundly moving in accepting the award that she turned to me and she said, "We should make a documentary about these guys." and that was actually the kind of planted the idea. And I have to say, Erin, I was a radio journalist at the time, and for me to think of doing a television a film documentary it made no sense at all. But I knew that it would have more impact. People would want to see a film and not just an audio, NPR style documentary that would be heard by a handful of people but not really seen.
Right.
And thankfully it was the right decision because all the guys you see in this film, from Joe Hosokawa to James Omura to they're all gone. The only survivors really are Roger Daniels, Art Hansen, and Grace Kubota, Gloria Kubota's daughter, who you'll see later. Michi was so emphatic in her interview. We actually had to use only the very small bits of her where she was not overamped on some of her she was on her caffeine, I think.
So the JCL at that time strongly felt and believed
this is great here
that they were doing the right thing,
and they were doing the wrong thing. And I mean, Clifford Ueda gave us that quote. I mean, Clifford's a former national president of JCL. For us to get that in there, I think was very powerful because Clifford was a maverick. He was, even though the national JCL president, he had a very objective view of the organization's role as we unfolded in this story. Oh my gosh, we're already up to Ben Kuroki. My gosh.
Oh my God.
Sergeant Ben Kuroki.
The top turd gunner when we flew the
Now watch this.
Pulaski oil refineries. That was a great feeling.
Ben Kuroki was a real gentleman. I wrote him a letter. I said we want to tell both sides of the story. I know that your role in this was a little bit controversial even at the time. And I think the fact that he ran a newspaper himself and was a former journalist in Southern California, he said my letter. Watch this.
Helpless. You can't do a damn thing. You can't fight back.
This came at the very end of the interview.
Shells, those 88 millimeter German shells are coming up there in the tons. And you feel the plane move this way behind it. And you sit there, oh God, let's get the hell out of here.
That soundbite, Erin, was the very last bit of like a 90-minute, 2-hour interview with Ben Kuroki.
Wow.
And he knew we were wrapping up, and he got that in. He got that in, and that was like the money shot, as they say. I mean, he just shared his feelings about being a turret gunner in the plane. And the photograph of him with Mike Masaoka's brother, Joe Grant Masaoka, was very fortuitous. So these are all still some of the War Relocation Authority of young. Roll call. We had 7 members of the Fair Play Committee, and how to get them all mentioned in the story
I remember.
This was Lillian's solution. It was just do a quick roll call, get the pictures up on the screen. We don't mention all their names, but
Rally, the Fair Play Committee crossed the line.
we got the pictures in. We honored the Fair Play Committee just in that one roll call shot, even though in the nature of storytelling, you have to focus on just a handful of characters. Like Phil Storholm took that shot in a barrack at Heart Mountain.
Against all principles of civilized usage. Therefore, we members of the Fair Play Committee
Recognize the voice?
I was going to say, I know who this is.
Yes. George was great. He was very gracious. He recorded this in Los Angeles over the microwave setup. So I was in Seattle directing him over the telephone. And he did it for scale. And it was, George at the time was very supportive of the Draft Resistors. He came to our 1993 homecoming. In fact, he was going to moderate or host the very first homecoming for the Heart Mountain Resistors that you'll see at the end of the film. He was going to moderate that at San Jose State University and had to bail at the last minute because the understanding was if he got a film role, that had to come first. He did. So Lawson Inada filled in to moderate that event, which you'll see later. Yosh Kuromiya, I know that his family is watching. His daughter Gail in Bellingham is watching. This meant a lot to Yosh to be able to tell his story in his very thoughtful way. Yosh being a graphic designer, an artist, architect.
Consider being like the rest of the guys and
this is great.
And don't make waves.
Yeah. Yosh, in fact, I think with the exposure of this, he went on to write he completed his memoirs. And I'm told that now Art Hansen and Gale and Lane Hirabayashi are getting his book published by the University Press of Colorado sometime in the future. It's being production now. So look for Yosh's memoirs, and maybe Gail can leave the title in the comments.
Frank, for a lot of the resistors that you interviewed, I mean, obviously not Frank Abe, but was it the first time talking about this experience or talking about it publicly, did you find, or?
On New Year's Day, they pounded rice.
Would you repeat the question, Erin, about publicly?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if for a lot of the resistors that you interviewed, like Yosh and Mitz and others, was this the first time they were talking publicly about their experience?
For some of them, Frank had appeared in many, not many, a handful of workshops in Southern California, and but I don't believe that James Omura and Mitz, Dave Kawamoto here, or Art had spoken. I think Art's son's watching. Eric, and he's watching this. I don't believe that they had spoken publicly. So no, this was their first exposure.
Wow.
An engineer named Kiyoshi Okamoto had been writing manifestos.
I have to say, Erin, this photograph may not be the correct photograph. I was told this was Kiyoshi Okamoto, but if you look at the cover of Art Hansen's book Barbed Voices, or on my DVD, we later, after the film was produced, found the mugshot of Kiyoshi Okamoto in Leavenworth. Doesn't look like that.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. That's
Okamoto was much tougher looking, and I think Frank even told me it didn't look like Okamoto, but that's what we had at the time, so it's locked in. This is Kenji Tagama's father, Nobudo Taguma, at Amachi, and I wish we could have told more about the Amachi resistors, the Tule Lake resistors. Jimmy Yamauchi would never forgave me for not including the Tule Lake resistors in this film, and we just couldn't do it. Now look at this. This is the first introduction of James Omura in this film, and we're already 20 minutes into it. And so that was part of the storytelling problem of how to introduce all these characters, and so we waited to introduce him until this moment.
Rocky Shimpo newspaper.
When Lawson says, he editorialized in the Rocky Shimpo.
I felt that someone should throw out what I felt was an anchor.
This actually is not Jimmy's home. This is Robert Sturgill's office on Queen Anne Hill in Seattle. He was here closing out his brother's estate.
Beyond that,
Oh, it's George again. Yeah.
Anything that would be critical of the United States government policy.
These stills, well, not this one, but I'll talk about the stills in a minute.
Organized, but
Art Hansen had all these photographs that Jimmy had bequeathed to him, and so that helped us a lot.
Marley, because we felt that.
The interviews with Frank Abe and all were shot in Dick Obayashi and Gina Nakato's dance studio in Los Angeles. They loaned us their space for that. That was a great shoot.
Guntaro Kubota, a Japanese language school teacher trained in law, translated the Fair Play bulletins into Japanese.
I thought, gee, we
have
to fight for
here she is.
You know, that's all we know is this.
Gloria Kubota was just a delightful, funny, outgoing person, and she told those wonderful stories, and the support that she showed for the, like she said, the boys, was just
the first
remarkable. And it was great that we finally got a woman, a character. That the resistance was also the Issei women and the Nisei women, like Gloria. Paul Tsuneishi, another longtime supporter of the resistors.
I was a white person. I wanted to be drafted.
That's the chimney at Hard Mountain when we were all there for a conference.
Some in back hid from the camera, but all chose this as their battlefield.
I'm going to say something here about the next voice.
We are not considering whether to report for the draft or not.
That's Professor Steve Sumida, University of Washington, an actor and also our voiceover artist here.
Constitution to be the for. Our conscience and our hearts shall be clear, knowing that we have had the courage to fight for a fundamental principle.
That's Jack Tono.
Well, it's naive, but I felt that we had a very strong case.
And this is, of course, his Mitz. A nice cut from Mitz then to Mitz now.
Denies you the right of American citizenship, that you have a right to redress it. And nowhere in the Constitution does it say that.
Mitz has had this wonderful quality, a very simple approach, very clear cut.
The soldiers
to his resistance.
Combat that same month.
Oh. Listen to the sound effects. The audio is the most important part of the film. And we had a sound architect named Jim Wilson who worked with me at Cairo Radio here in Seattle. That's my okay.
Unit publicist.
Jim dubbed in the typing sounds, the rifle shots, and they just really bring the whole story alive. I really owe a lot to Jim for doing that. He produced commercials for us at Cairo Radio, and yes, really spent a lot of time with us on the sound, just layering the sound architecture for the soundtrack.
Society. In Wyoming, the trial of the resistors took 2 weeks. The judge handed down the verdict.
Like here comes another. We discussed how many gavel blows to have.
They were sentenced to 3 years in a federal penitentiary.
I'm going to say something about the music here in a minute because we're already half an hour in and I haven't said anything about Alan Koshiyama's score. But what's really important to me in this film, Erin, was the music score and how the music really, when I screen this for audiences, it really carries the story emotionally. And I'm a big film music soundtrack fan. I collect soundtracks. John Barry in particular. And who did the James Bond films, and one I'll mention here in 5 minutes.
I did have a lot of concern for how they were holding up.
But we wanted to have a music score that was, oh my God, this
1944.
Tanko Bushi, Lillian Benson, our editor, put this in here just because she wisely knew we had to segue back to the life of the camp, what was happening. And I would never have picked this shot, But she did, and it made perfect sense because it was the right time in July when the second trial of the conspiracy trial, the Fair Play Committee, was about to start. And this, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, doing the Tankobushi at Cleveland Buddhist Church, so Konodori is very much in my life. And the music is actually from a cassette that Frank Abe's wife, who's actually, I think, Shin Issei, Japanese, gave us. So I asked for some music, and she gave us this cassette tape, and it had Tankobushi on it, and it was the exact Tankobushi 45 that I remember from Cleveland. So that was a bit of a Easter egg for myself to put that in there. But it really just breaks up the flow of the story so nicely.
Kubota, an older Issei, was not even eligible for the draft. He was arrested.
We knew it was coming. They took him away about 10 days after, I guess, my son was born. So
gosh.
Just, went through everything. Our unit was small, but, when they mix up everything.
Watch the subtitles on the names. We keep changing the identifier as we go along so that it kind of brings new information about who they are.
Blind.
Like we started off, well, anyway.
I was worried because I didn't know how long I'd be blind, but fortunately I was okay the next day.
In Denver, the FBI...
Lawson Inada as the narrator was just the right choice for this. I mean, he has the poetic voice, he has the delivery, the presence, and we worked really hard on his narration to have it be have him be in the background and not in the foreground, because Lawson's accustomed to reading poetry, as the center of attention. Right. And there's a different technique for him to say the narration more matter-of-factly, to toss it off, to just throw it away. And I told him, you have to be invisible. We must not feel you the way we feel you as a poet doing a poetry reading. And it took us a little bit. I said, you're not the soloist, you're the backup player. And when I said you're the backup player, he got that. He said, oh yeah, I'm not the soloist. I'm playing backup here. And he does provide that cushion along with the music and the editing to bring the story along. Yeah, I learned a lot from working with everybody on this thing.
The thing I could think at the time was that it was a matter of racism. And I worried a great deal about it.
Yeah, Phil Sturholm lit this so well. Look at the lighting, the top lighting, against the black background. You can see all the wrinkles in Omura's face, the years he lived with this, and just the thought.
Yeah.
Personal Japanese ancestry.
To raise a defense fund, Omura appealed to the writers he once published. He received not one dime. His wife took a second job to pay his attorney. When Gloria Kubota's husband was taken away, neighbors began to whisper.
Of course, people want to know how I'm taking it, so.
Again, I was saying about the music, we didn't want to do the shakuhachi or the flute. But the shakuhachi or the koto, which is kind of the go-to at 20 years ago for these films about the camps. Being a film music aficionado myself, I really wanted something more orchestral sounding. And so I was looking for a composer. And at the time, you had to go through the internet, through the early days of the internet. The Film Music Job Wire was a listserv. And one guy replied, Alan Koshiyama, and I called him up right away, excited to get it, because I really wanted a Japanese-American composer.
Frank Abe kept
I called Alan. I said, "Great, let's do a demo." And then I said, "Koshiyama, you're not related to Mitz Koshiyama at all, are you? It's a long shot." He goes, "Uncle Mitz."
Oh my gosh!
The music composer is the nephew of Mitz Koshiyama, living in Sacramento. Starting off his career as a music composer, and not only that, but I mean the score he gave us was exactly what we wanted, because it sounded like John Barry. And we worked very hard on replicating that sound.
Anybody'd get off. In fact, I was surprised that he didn't get longer than the other people because, he doesn't have citizens. But they asked him why he was, he says, well, I have 2 children born in this country. As a father, I am interested in their welfare. They have rights,
Interviewed after the trial, Ben Kuroki called the resistance a stab in the back and complained its
I
leader.
like the way that I wrote the narration exactly to catch that line, first line of the article.
James Amore was.
And I asked on the DVD extras, the outtakes, that Ben Kuroki explains more about that quote. You know, how he was only following the script given to him. I believe written by JCL, and I believe it was written by Mike Masaoka. So he was taking direction from the JCL, and I think over the years he wanted to distance himself from that a little bit, and so that was, I think, part of the reason why he talked to us was to have that be acknowledged.
The JACL emerged in 1930 from groups of professionals eager to prove their Americanism and loyalty. Only the Nisei, born in America as citizens, could belong.
You know what's happening, Erin?
Some bragged of leading raids.
We were watching the film out of sequence. I was wondering what was happening. I didn't catch it. This is actually earlier in the film, and I think that what's happened is that Royce has. Oh, this is a great quote.
To collaborate with the government.
Yes.
Collaborate.
Go on, Roger. Go on. Say it.
Some of the chief oppressors of the Japanese American people, and you can certainly justify this as a political tactic. It's very difficult to justify it as a moral position.
Yes. Thank you, Roger Daniels. I mean, that again, these money shots. You know, our film after Robin and the Moon was the second but more directly took on the JACL's cooperation with incarceration, and named I think we're the first to name Mike Masaoka as the wartime leader of the JACL.
Right.
So. Art Hansen.
Brought up around too many other Japanese Americans, and yet he was catapulted into this position of the head of the Japanese American.
This is a little Tokyo Cafe.
Which means that he did not have a lot of community restraint.
Art Hansen.
He did have, because of his Mormonism, a hyper Americanism.
Thank you, Art. So those two quotes together, provided the basis, the documentation for us, for the story, the sub story, the secondary story of JACL's cooperation with incarceration, which was, the Heart Mountain resistors were fighting against not only the government but their own people, the Japanese American leadership.
Right.
This was, Michi.
They want to raid a concentration,
She was a little hyped up in the interview.
Yeah.
For bombs
that our story is about this these two layers of that they resist against, and 20 years ago this was very it was challenging for the public, and challenging for our community to accept. So Roger and Art, with their academic, very strong quotes, made it very clear that it wasn't that we weren't, making this up, basically. And so the documentary kind of rests on the authority of those two sound bites right there. And I was going to say, Erin, we're watching this out of sequence because this comes earlier in the film. I don't know how this is happening, but I suspect it's the tracks are mixed up.
Japanese Americans, but not through the draft. Volunteers would be taken for a segregated unit led by white officers.
Frank, what was the reaction like when this film came out? How was it received in 2001?
I'll tell you in a second here. Okay, again, the rifle sound effects that Jim Wilson
100%
layered in, multiple tracks.
100% Americans do even worse. And I think this was one of the problems of many of the JACL leaders, that they were trying to be 200% Americans.
I'm from Seattle.
This quote here.
I was evacuated from the Pacific Coast. When the call came for volunteers for a combat team.
If anyone knows who this guy is, please leave a comment in the chat room, because when I show this in Seattle, we all go, "Who is that guy?" He says he's from Seattle. I'd love to find out who he is.
To me, I have nothing to prove. I am an American citizen. I never did anything wrong, and I don't have to prove myself.
Several generations from now.
Oh, this is very strange. Okay, so now we jump to the end of the film, Erin.
Going to become legendary.
We can't do anything about this right now because this is all live.
Be proud.
Okay, so this is the end of the film.
Who would not put up with
This music score from Alan Koshiyama, I'll say this now. Listen to it. It's a live trumpet with a synthesized orchestra. And this is the San Jose 1992 San Jose State University first homecoming of the Hart Mountain Fair Play Committee. The return, the boys of Mountain View, San Jose, and this is Lawson. This is one of the first public reunions of the boys, of the guys.
Americanism is not a matter of race.
The sound, the melody you're hearing is. I asked Alan to. I played "Dances with Wolves" from for Alan, and he goes, "Oh, you really want a long melodic line there?" And I said, "Yeah, John Bay is a." And he if you've seen "Dances with Wolves," this is like an inversion of the John Dunbar theme in the movie, and Alan perfectly captured it and gave the Resistors this theme. This subtitle in July of 2000, the JCL voted to apologize. It was great for the Resistors. I was happy for them, but it really messed us up because if we had finished the film in early 2000, and then in May of 2000 in Monterey, JCL apologized, we had to go back into the post-production and had to spend several $1,000s to add that subtitle, the caption. And Lillian, Alan, Philip, I want to thank them all. Jim Wilson. We're going to come back to them in a second because this is not the end of the film, folks. We're watching. This is a very psychedelic experience for me, and for you too, I'm sure.
Well, I'm impressed you can keep this narrative line going with the jumping around. It's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this music, this last bit of sound here is very John Barry-ish there. This is the church in the Union Church in Los Angeles was filmed at in 1993. Now, what's going to happen here?
Oh,
yes, see, we're going back.
Okay,
so Erin, this is the.
Well, that was and our son
the latter 2/3 of the film after the trial after the second trial of the Fair Play Committee, the conspiracy trial, and there's Grace, Gloria's daughter. Gloria's daughter. She's a retired attorney now in San Jose, and I hope that she's watching with Jack.
At Leavenworth, they did hard time with bank robbers, crime bosses, and con artists.
So this is the sad part of the story, and Alan's music score captures that defeat
of our resistance.
Yeah. Of the resistance, the setback. Here's Frank's Tokyo Dojo.
They organized a prison exhibition.
And the next coming up is going to be a music cue called Letters from Leavenworth, which is kind of a cue that takes us to the end of the film, which you've already seen. But
something like that, they were really
that Alan introduces to underscore the drawings that Gunter Kubota made while in prison.
I always felt that was one reason we were left alone.
Oh yeah, the Geo story.
1944, the threat of Japanese invasion.
Michi Wegman made this point to me about FDR's election being a factor in delaying the closing of the camps.
And allowing Japanese America to go home.
I must say that Michi Wegman supported this film with an early $2,000 contribution to help us get some of the first interviews filmed. So Michi and Walter really made this film possible. They were the very first fund and support.
Quiet America. Image idealized in this government film shown in camp.
I love this, how we grab this from the propaganda films. You've been showing a lot of the propaganda films in this pilgrimage.
Right.
Whatever it holds, they're sure that it lies in the United States.
And this captured for us this moment of resettlement. I was born in Ohio myself as a result of resettlement, so that was personal to me too.
Yeah.
Cells. It was 1945.
Again, Alan's music score here just really functions to bring us to like this. Oh, now it's a happy moment because now the soldiers are coming home, the war's over, and we do it without resorting to the cliches of a shakuhachi.
And the propaganda about the 442nd was, of course,
We filmed Roger in a barracks at Hard Mountain. So we were all there for a conference in like 94, 95 at Northwest College. And Roger was there. And so we were able to get his interview inside a barrack at Hard Mountain. We lost the establishing shot where we show that he's actually in an old barrack there.
Oda moved her children to a Wyoming boarding house.
And this to me is the saddest. Oh, not this.
Her husband sent them letters.
I didn't read the letters because I couldn't.
So here, this is Letters from Leavenworth, the music cue that really brings in late. That just kind of lets you know the show is about to end.
Perceived my brother to be as he was growing up.
I think these drawings are all now posted at the Den Show website, also on my website as well.
Yeah. Frank Abe taught him how to. Frank Abe was not a very good teacher because
I love this part.
This is great.
Victoria and Makiko. I am very sorry to Makiko. Last time I was sent to picture for Hidemaro. That's my brother Gordon. I know Maki want to, but I was very busy to draw a picture.
Guntoro named his first son Gordon after Gordon Hirabayashi.
In prison.
It's a self-portrait of Frank Abe.
Of him.
No, of Guntoro Kubota, that's right.
He and Frank Abe were cellmates, and they must have had an inordinate amount of time.
We actually filmed this in the basement of Ruby and Ping Chow here in Seattle.
And
Ruby Chow being the person who brought Bruce Lee over to Seattle to work in her restaurant. So we needed a space, and she let us use her basement for that.
Play committee leaders. It ruled the jury improperly ignored civil disobedience as
these stills, the way that they're shown in shadows. I want to thank Tom Spear of KCTS, former KCTS, for shooting those stills in an artistic way. Sure. People in Seattle will recognize that as a Tom Spear style insert, casting a shadow across documents like that.
Train ticket to Los Angeles.
Frank Abe raised a toast to his.
Interestingly, this next shot is going to be from a dinner party we filmed in the Little Tokyo Cafe, and we use that little Kampai audio underneath that shot of the victory party. It just fits very well.
Right.
And were released later in 1946. All but one. Days before his release, Fred Irie was electrocuted, working in the prison powerhouse.
Now, coming up is, I haven't really talked about Lillian's editing yet. Oh, this is the saddest moment to me in this whole film.
Sisters learned they had been pardoned by President.
Is celebrating Christmas, inside a prison in 1947, alone. There's the Resistors theme. We called it a different battlefield, the Resistors theme, but it's really John Dunbar theme from Dances with Wolves.
They knocked on the door, and
Dave Kawamoto. I grew up in Cupertino, California, near Santa Clara, near San Jose, and Dave was a postal service worker in Cupertino, and glad to have him share his story here.
Yeah.
Frank Abe took that photograph of that guard at Hart Mountain. We used that picture. It's not a WRA photograph.
Civil rights restored. Before I go, I said, if you can do that, I'll be glad and willing to go.
At Hart Mountain, 1 of every 9 young men drafted refused induction. So many.
Holy cow, Erin! I was a little lost. We jumped back to the trial. There are 2 trials, Erin, of the Fair Play Committee. The mass trial of '63, and the second of the conspiracy trial of the 7 leaders.
Right.
We've now jumped back to
when you know that
when I was talking about Steve Sumida reading that letter from jail. Yes. We're back at that point now where we're talking about.
One leader against them was Minya
the run-up to the first trial. So we jumped back to early 44, Minya Sui's
the JACL.
Minya Sui and Joe Grant Masaoka going to the Cheyenne jail. They're doing a little tour of all the camps, trying to browbeat the insurgency of these draft resistors. Listen to this.
Credit that we were bringing to the Japanese American society in
leaning on them.
And but
this is Heart Mountain.
I think the real purpose of being there was they were seeking larger game. In that, they
Say it, Yosh.
tried to get me to implicate.
Say it, Yosh.
Names.
Name names. There it is.
People, the leaders of the Fair Play Committee.
Yasui filed a
Yasui and Masaoka were trying to get them to rat on their comrades. Oh, so this is Mako.
But the men kept their spirits high, composing jailhouse songs the guards could not understand.
On my website, you'll see the Song of Cheyenne. We found a scrap of paper in James Cotto's wallet. He carried on for 40 years. This scrap of paper he wrote inside the jail. We called it Song of Cheyenne. And we had Mako. We had Mako to read at this event where we recorded his singing here. And he said, I know this. This is this fits the lyrical, the scans for the Hawaiian plantation song, the Hora Hora Bushi.
Oh,
and so, yeah, and so Mako sang it to the music of the Hora Hora Bushi, which Franklin Odo wrote a book about. And he said, this fits, and that extra is also on the DVD.
Of boiler rooms and latrines.
Oh, I do this voiceover. I came cheap.
Darkness. Leaders of the Fair Play Committee have fired with fanatical zeal.
They called us half-witted, nuts, demented, and we were seditionists and disloyals and everything under the sun.
These deluded youths have our deepest sympathy.
This is the Heart Mountain Sentinel. It's written by Haruo Imura. I happened to meet his daughter in San Jose. His daughter tends to be a friend of my mother's in San Jose. That was kind of odd. There's a lot of connections like that, and I'll mention later, perhaps.
To report for induction, even though the penalty.
I mean, Lillian's editing here. She pulled together so many bits and pieces from our footage that I would never have in a million years caught. And so
I knew the consequences.
I'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But I also understood that was the last hitch that they had left, that they could hold to or become a part of, and so
I
supported that.
To prove they were not free, 3 Fair Play leaders tried to walk out of camp without a pass.
So I'll say it now, Erin. What Lillian Benson did for us, and Shannon G. I mean, brought Lillian into the production. One of the best things she ever did was to introduce us to Lillian, because she had worked with Lillian before. Lillian Benson, the editor, was the first African American woman in the Guild, the Association of Cinema Editors. And she edited Eyes. She was one of the editors on the Landmarks PBS series Eyes on the Prize. So she turned out to be the best choice for us to edit this film, because she understood and embraced the story of principled resistance, so civil disobedience. And we came to her with the script, and ITVS, PBS, ITVS said they gave us funding to finish the film, but they said, your script reads like a book. It reads like a book, and it's not visual. Here's the money to finish it, but we want you to hire a real film editor from Los Angeles, from Hollywood.
Leadership.
And so Shannon contacted Lillian, and they holed up for like 2 or 3 weeks in Santa Monica, and put together a rough cut, and they showed me the rough cut. And I go, where'd you get that shot? Like the shot of the rubber stamping of the loyalty oath. Where do you get this shot here? This shot here, and or this shot? I go, well, it was in your footage. Oh, that was in your footage. Well, that was in your footage. And I go, oh. And what Lillian did was she took the script story and opened it up visually from the inside, opened up the story visually, and so she said she edited the story together, edited the sound bites together.
The barbed wire was always
Ben Kuroki, and she left spaces for me to write narration.
Wow.
And so all I really had to do was write the narration and have Lawson read it and fit into the slots that Lillian left for us to fill in. And that's how the story really got constructed, really got built. And that is the work of a really good film editor. This color footage was shot by Eiichi Sakaue in San Jose, an orchard man in San Jose. My father was there too, actually, at Hard Mountain. He saw Ben Cruz.
Things that I said.
So that color footage was very important to us. And then when we had the color footage, that was when we knew we had to get Ben Kuroki on camera to comment on it. And thankfully, Ben Kuroki graciously agreed to be interviewed.
We just thought
Even though
an asshole for coming into camp for
even though he knew that the Fair Play Committee didn't resented him for coming in and telling them in essence what to do.
Right.
He was a free American. He didn't have to endure what we had to go through.
By April,
336.
36 men had been inducted.
I figured that out after comparing the notes.
He left. 6 more resisted.
Okay, so this is actually the halfway point of the movie, Erin. So this is a fade out here, a nice fade out at the half-hour mark where time. Oh no, we're gonna. I see.
Is that the
And
end?
this is okay. This is the end. Okay, so this is. I think we've seen all the footage. Now we're going back to the beginning, so we can bail out here, Erin.
Okay.
That was very interesting. So that was.
It was like testing your knowledge of the film, which I think.
I've lived with it for 20, 25, 30 years now. So we started this process in 1992, so it's been 30 years.
Wow.
We are families.
So maybe Kimiko and Royce, can we remove the film and
yeah,
I can be on screen?
In prison.
Great, thank you.
Oh, hi, Erin. Here you are. Oh, hello. So thanks everyone for. Oh, there you are. There's Erin. Okay. Yeah, that was psychedelic. That was something else. I apologize to the audience for. But then again, it's you saw all the footage, and so the story. A lot of you know the story already, so that's okay.
Right. Well, that was fun, and I've seen that film a couple times now, Frank, and I learned a lot watching it with you, even out of order. But we will encourage folks who are watching who maybe haven't seen Conscience in the Constitution, check it out this week. It's part of our film festival for this coming week of the pilgrimage. I'm pretty sure. Yes, Kimiko's nodding backstage. So yes, for week 4. So we'll have the chance to spend more time with the film. So Frank, thanks for that. I mean, what an awesome way to learn more about the backstory of the film itself.
Like I say, Erin, this is the DVD commentary that Lillian wanted us to do back in 2011. Didn't have time to do it or the expertise. And so it's also, a nice way in this pandemic to show the film in a different way. Because you're all at home experiencing this on your computers, much the way you'd watch a DVD commentary at home. So it's kind of an innovative approach. I see Keone Young's comment. Steve Sumida from Watercress Farm. Yes, Keone. Hello, Keone. In Hawaii. That Steve Sumida from Aiea, near Pearl Harbor, overlooking Pearl Harbor. That's Steve. Professor Sumida, Watercress Farm. And Steve's now, and Gail now living in retirement here in Seattle. So yeah, that's Steve.
That's great. So Frank, I mean, we can really talk about anything for our last minutes here together. And if there are questions from those of you watching along, please leave them in the YouTube comments there. But I am really curious about how this was received in 2001 when it came out. I know it was after the JACL apology to the resistors, but still, that's 20 years ago. So what was the reception to the film?
Well, it came out. Oh, that's right. It came out in 2000, immediately after, like months after the JACL's apology. And the response was crickets. I mean, it got reviewed well in Mother Jones. And unfortunately in Seattle, it was released during the newspaper strike. So it didn't get reviewed by the top, the A-team reviewers. And the Japanese American community, I really did not hear anything from JCL. Didn't hear from JCL stalwarts like Fred Hirosuna of Fresno, who we did interview. Oh, you know what? I know what happened. We lost. Oh wait, we may have lost the scene of the Fresno JCL voting to against the apology resolution. I think that's missing because I didn't see Fred Hirosuna speaking to the microphone saying, "This is wartime, and in wartime, constitutional rights go out the window," which of course is not true.
Right.
You need them more than ever in wartime or in times like now. But Fred Hirosuna was among those who wrote letters to the editor in the Japanese press, Japanese American press, saying, "Who is this Frank Abe, and why is he getting this big grant from the Civil Liberties Education Fund? Fresno JCL only got so much money," and the implication being that this was not a legitimate story to tell, that the only legitimate narrative in our community was JCL loyalty and Nisei soldiers' valor, the valor of the Nisei soldiers. So that his objection was exactly the reason why this film needed to be made. But the response of the community was, I didn't hear a word from anybody, and really not to this day has anyone said, "Oh no, what you saw with Masaoka." I mean, people have flinched at it and asked me about it, but no one's ever said it's wrong, and no one's ever said that it was incorrect. So, and I think that attests to our treatment, our very careful treatment. I'm a journalist, right. And our very careful treatment of how we presented the JCL story. In the first cut, Shannon and Lillian put together. Thank you very much, you guys. They didn't have Mike Masaoka so early in the film, and I kind of had to argue with them to shoehorn in Masaoka earlier in the film and have it be a stronger theme. I'm glad I did.
Right.
It took some work to make to write around it, but it was not something we talked about in the community at the time, and now I'm grateful that 20 years later I do see the resistors talked about, as I hope they would be, on a kind of an equal plane with the valor of the Nisei soldiers.
Right. And I think you mentioned this, at least in the Facebook event, but Heart Mountain is working on digitizing all of Frank Emmy's papers to have those available. I'm helping with a project that's writing, brief biographies of all of the 63 draft resistors from Heart Mountain, at least. And I'm always struck, I was just going through my notes from last summer when I started working on this. I'm struck by the broad range of reasons for why some of these guys didn't show up for their physicals. And there's one in particular where he was moving between work assignments. And so actually his draft papers just kind of got lost in the way he was moving between Chicago and Heart Mountain, and he wasn't sure where to show up for his physical. And then he ends up arrested because this sort of idea of this mass group of draft resistors all sort of under the puppetry of the Fair Play Committee or what have you. And that story seemed so sad to me, of just a way that this narrative that we don't learn about gets so collapsed into sort of one story. And so it's been fun to go through and see all of the different reasons for why some of these guys decided not to show up, some of whom, didn't really know about the Fair Play Committee. And so that quote that you highlighted from Yosh, where he's, talking about trying to name names, or someone trying to get him to name names and not doing that. I think I was thinking about all of the guys who said, like, I made this decision by myself. I wasn't aware of a larger movement necessarily. There's just so much that's there, I think, still to be told. And this film does such a good job of opening the door to a lot of that history too.
Thank you, Erin. That's a very good point you made about the diversity among these 63 guys. And it's important to note that the Fair Play Committee really only refers to the steering committee of the 7 leaders who were tried for conspiracy. And Frank always was very clear to say that, we're not telling you what to do. We're only giving you information. We're not even giving you advice. And I can't counsel. He wrote to Jim Akutsu in Minidoka that I can't tell you what to do. You have to decide for yourself. We're just providing information. Maybe because he knew that conspiracy was a possible federal crime, but also I think that they wanted to very hands-off approach. So among the 63 guys, yeah, there's a lot of people, like you say, whose reasons were different. There were like there were only a handful, Mitz, Dave, Yosh, George Nozawa, who spoke with us, who had gone public, if you will. One fellow who later did talk to us, George Ishikawa, the late George Ishikawa, offered Frank Chin money to not be named in his book because his family, his wife, really didn't want him to be public as a convicted felon, if you will, an ex-felon, a pardoned felon, and as to subject herself again to that kind of community ostracism. So there is the fellows who spoke to us were, it's hard to say, and you will show us in your archive the broad range of reasons why the 63 did refuse induction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that actually makes me think. I don't know if we saw Takashi Hoshizaki in this version of the film, but he's another one who he actually participated in an elder panel the first week of this pilgrimage, and he talked about. I asked him, did you, when you started dating your wife or courting her, as he called it, did you tell her that you had spent time in federal prison? And his response was so funny because I think he was like, I told her this story and she was okay with it. I wanted her to know before we got, before I asked her to marry me. But he's another one who didn't start talking so much about this history until, the last maybe 2 decades or so. But these, it's just so valuable to hear about. He talks about how much he learned while he was at McNeil Island in this maximum security prison, how much he learned from being around the other conscientious objectors who were not Japanese Americans from camp. And, also around a wide variety of people. And I think those stories are so interesting and complicate what we think of as this particular moment in history. And I'm always curious about what happened to these guys once they went back to their families and their communities, like what that transition was like.
Erin, that's in the missing 6 minutes that didn't get encoded apparently. There's a great sequence. I was about to say it when it didn't pop up, and that's when I realized what was happening. There's a great sequence after Omura's, after this conspiracy trial and the prison experience. Lillian built in this boys to men sequence where we showed pictures of the young Mitz, young Omura, and fading to them today at a dinner party we staged in the Little Tokyo Cafe in Little Tokyo, and it was called Boys to Men, and you can see that there's a little postscript, and we didn't get to see that shows that Omura couldn't get a job in the Denver Japanese American community because JCL was going around blackballing him with other employers. He became a landscaper. And Tak Hoshizaki makes a cameo at the dinner party. And Tak establishes for us that he was in the 63 resistors, in the mass trial. Mm-hmm. And then after camp, was drafted again during the Korean War.
Right.
And being a free man with all his rights restored back in California, he served.
Right.
And he goes, right, I served.
Now, right.
I'm a veteran. Tak Hoshizaki is a veteran because these guys were not conscientious objectors. They were not bucking the draft, as they called it, because they were afraid, if you will, of fighting. No, they were ready to fight. And Tak Hoshizaki proves it.
Right. And so many of part of the research that I'm doing is going through all of their loyalty questionnaires and looking at how they actually responded to those last 2 questions. And it's amazing to see and to think of, men, boys at that age, some of them 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds saying things like, I think Takashi's response is something along the lines of, when the government loves my citizenship rights the way that it's supposed to, then I'll serve. And it's just so straightforward and clear and powerful. And I think a good reminder, especially as Clement pointed out in our YouTube comments on the 4th of July, as we're thinking about, what our country stands for, to have this message. And I know when we talked about showing this film on this day, you were like, I like the symbolism of this. And I think it's true to think about what citizenship actually means and when we need to take a stand on, how we are enacting those forms of citizenship.
Yes.
We do have one question, and then I guess we are almost at the end of our time, but a question about, were the resistors ever physically attacked? I know Frank Chin was assaulted in Los Angeles, Keon Young says.
What? Keone? No. Frank Emmy or Frank Chin?
He says Frank Chin. But
physically attacked. I mean, Keone may be thinking about the time in San Francisco when Alex Hing famously beat up Frank, but that was in the 60s. No, they were not physically attacked. As I talked over Frank Amy's quote, they were not attacked in prison. And this was Minya Sui's, forgive me, Holly, but I mean, this was Minya Sui's threat to the boys in the Cheyenne jail when they went to visit. They're going to, don't do this. You'll embarrass your families. You'll stain your reputation. You'll have a prison record, but they're going to beat you up in prison. They're going to beat you with 2x4s in prison, is what Minya Sui said to many of the guys. Repeat the same quote: 2x4s. And Frank Emmy testifies that no, all these guys in prison were all these, I mean, these Hakujin guys, these white guys, they kind of respected us, what we did. Plus, in Frank's case, they held the judo exhibition at Leavenworth, where they threw the little guys through the big guys, the big white guys in prison. And so when the inmates saw that, they all said, "Okay, don't mess with these Japanese kids, because they know this, jujitsu, this judo," and that shielded them a little bit. But no, they were not attacked at Keone, only from their own community. The only attacks came from Nisei veterans or others who resented that they took the principal stand that they did for whatever reason.
That's great. Well, thanks so much, Frank. I know we could keep talking about this for a long time, and we will at a different time. But is there anything else you want to share, or anything I didn't ask you about before we wrap up?
Well, I mean, Keone says Frank Chin was assaulted in Little Tokyo. That I haven't heard about that. So email me, Keone, and I want to hear about it. I want to hear the story about Frank getting assaulted in Little Tokyo. That's rich. Kenji Tagama says Minya Sui and Joe Grant also visited the Granada resistors, and that's absolutely true, including Kenji's father. And Kenji, I'm sorry we didn't get your father's story more clearly in there, but we'll try and make up for that someday. Yeah. Well, thank you, Erin. This has been wonderful. Great experience. I want to thank again Shannon G for rescuing this our little project of tapes, our collection of beta SP tape, and bringing us into the PBS quality, and Lillian Benson for turning our book into a movie, and to Jim for the audio soundtrack, and for Alan for really making the. I really wish you could hear the music score in sequence, because then you appreciate the narrative arc that the music score serves to tell the stories. That's one of the things I'm most proud of, is the music score in this movie, along with the editing and the and Lawson's narration. So, so thanks to all. Thanks for watching, and Erin, great job, you guys all. Kimiko, great job. You guys do great.
You too, Frank. And those of you watching, thank you so much. We'll be back live in a little bit under an hour for the Nikkei Block Party. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.